Now, if you heard that, that's going to be going away because we are going to have a new intro for the Red Alert podcast. I got to take time to make it, though. So if you're joining us, we're the Red Alert podcast. Me and Cindy are here to talk Red Wings hockey with you. You know, we talk Red Wings hockey every week. And
You're such a
unfortunately,
you're such a slacker, Joe. You don't have the stuff ready yet. What the heck?
here's the thing. I made it, and then I realized, oh my god, like this is not gonna go good because I think that there are some people out there that would kind of say it's like copyright infringement because
Woo! Don't do that.
So I learned my lesson off that before, so I got to kind of rework it. So it's
I'm just giving you a hard time because it's Christmas. I got to give you something.
well, we know that there's a TV company with the Detroit Red Wings that's going broke, so we don't need any of those people coming towards us. But welcome to the Red Alert Podcast. I'm your host Joe Chap, along with Cindy Berry, and Cindy is she just has a static photo right now because that's what she's doing.
Because
And
I'm in an undisclosed location, Joe. This is like a secret undisclosed location.
And unfortunately we got to talk about the Red Wings. And I know me and you have said some of the things that we've said, but you got to take a victory lap because there was one person that you said was going to make the roster at training camp, and that was Michael Hutchinson.
Yep.
Now we didn't know all these things that have to happen to get Michael Hutchinson on the roster. And I still didn't think they would get Michael Hutchinson on the roster because he would have to pass their waivers and all that stuff, but they did. So you take your victory lap.
And I'm going. Here I go. Victory lap. Here's the thing. Here's what I saw at training camp. Why I said, keep your eye on Michael Hutchinson. I said this on the show right during that period of time. There were a couple of things that I saw from him. First off, very sharp in net, actually. I think just, whatever his issues were, he just had some other guys ahead of him that I think the Wings felt were a little more reliable, okay? But very sharp in net, what I saw. I also saw them doing a lot of work with Hutchinson. I saw them having a lot of top guys taking shots on net with him, working with him. And whenever I see that, I'm like, you know what? They got this guy coming. And I think a matter of what was, I think the Wings always saw Michael Hutchinson as part of their future. I just don't think they saw it this soon. For one reason or another, and they already had commitments too in other areas. So I think it was just a matter of space and just a matter of the combination of guys they had. But I think Michael Hutchinson was always part of the program. I was actually a little surprised he didn't make the roster just because I saw the attention and all the time and just he looked real sharp, very good. He's very good with the glove, which is tough. A lot of goalies aren't. And he is. It seems to be a strength of his on his glove side. So that's good news too. So I think what I'm hoping for, Joe, honestly, is I'm looking for Michael Hutchinson to be our Jordan Biddington. Guy that's way down in depth somewhere, and all these amazing, horrible, unfortunately, things happen with injuries and things of this nature, and all of a sudden you get a guy like that. They gave him a 1-year contract. I think that speaks something too. It's not they're just bringing him up; they're giving him that 1-year contract, and I wouldn't be surprised if they extend him after this season if he shows up the way he did in training camp and stays consistent with that. So. I'm hoping he can be our Jordan Biddington and we can have a Cinderella season like St. Louis did. It is not too late. Everyone's thinking it's too late. Is it time to hit the panic button? I'm seeing all these kind of headlines. I'm going to tell you, no, it is not. Everyone just stay calm. Everything's going to be okay. And if he can be our Jordan Biddington, that means we're set for a possible Cinderella season. How about that?
Well, I don't think he's going to be your Jordan Biddington, but I think that he could come in and maybe help you out a little bit. And maybe if you do find something, you don't expect it, but you hope that, when you give a guy a chance that he kind of runs with it. That's what you're hoping for, right? And I think that the Red Wings goaltending has been an issue for them. We know that because in the last, we could put the graphic up right now. I mean, none of the goalies are really playing their best hockey right now.
Yeah, really, Joe. Like, how much worse could it get? Let's be honest.
I mean, Alex Lyon's playing good hockey, but how long will that last? I mean, James Reimer, he got beat down last night, and it's not all his fault. But it's kind of a split tandem. The Red Wings, their goaltending issue is not just goaltending; it's defense as well. And what I look at with this is if Hutchinson could be serviceable, that could help the Detroit Red Wings out a lot. And I think that they need someone to steady the net right now. And if I don't think if Hutchinson isn't the guy, or they still have these issues going in January, I think it's imperative that kind of uh, Steve Eisman goes and makes a move for a goalie, because I don't think you can wait that long. Now, who is he going to go for? I mean, I've heard Marc-Andre Fleury could be available, and people don't like him because he's older. But the reality of the situation is, at some point, you're gonna have to make a decision of who you're gonna have on this roster, and who's gonna be your goalie that you want to take into the playoffs if you make it. I know there was a lot of people out there saying, I don't think they're gonna make the playoffs, or they're pushing the panic button. It's the same thing I told Lions fans, and I'm a great grief counselor. I've been a Lions podcaster for about 2 years now.
I love it, grief counselor.
I'm a public grief counselor. Now, here's the thing. You're not as bad as you're playing right now, and you're not as good as you were early in the season. You're kind of in the middle, and that's all right, because sometimes your good is super, super good, and sometimes your bad can be horrible. And we see that in the NFL right now. We saw the San Francisco 49ers lose 3 straight, and now they look like world beaters. So it's across across the whole spectrum of sports. I mean, when we were talking about 2002 Red Wings, right? They didn't win a game in April. People forget that. And then, if you look at the 08 Red Wings, they won 4 games in January and February. 4. So it's a long season. You're going to have bumps in the road, and this is one of them. And you know what? It's a good thing that you built out a great first half of the season, where now you can kind of, if you're on a bad territory right now of, losing 7 out of 6, but you have a shot, 6 out of 7, you have a shot to just kind of put this together. And the Christmas break comes at a perfect time for the Red Wings.
God knows they need it. I mean, I think they need the opportunity to kind of step back a minute, reset, hit that reset button and reevaluate. There's no doubt right now also they're incredibly frustrated. They've said by their own admission, Dylan Larkin has said it, Mo Sider has said it, Derek Lalonde has said it, a number of other players said it. I think Comforts has said it, Kane said it. They're trying everything they can. They're throwing everything at this. They don't know, trying to fix it. And sometimes when you're in that situation, what you really need to do, instead of trying to kind of fit a square peg in a round hole, what you got to do is you got to step back a minute and just let it sit, let it rest, and reevaluate, and then come back fresh. You'll have a fresh perspective, a new set of eyes, fresh legs, fresh everything, a different attitude. Don't think about hockey for a couple of days. It's tough. It's almost impossible for these guys. It's like when people tell me, don't think about what I do for a couple of days. It's tough, right? It's like, how can I stop the brain, right?
No, you can't stop thinking about that, because that's your business is a 24/7 line of work.
Well, that's true. That's true.
And you deal with crazy people, because you're,
I'm a specialist at crazy. You're the public grief counselor, and I'm the specialist with crazy. So it works out just great. So, no worries. But so I think I think you're right. I think they need this from a psychological perspective. They probably also need it from a physical perspective, because this team is tired. And it was interesting. I was listening to Ozzy and Larry Murphy yesterday in kind of their post-game analysis, and a couple of things struck me. One, they said, no player or coach is going to come out and say, hey, we're tired. Physically, we're tired. And then it was so funny, because then Dylan Larkin, the first thing he said was, oh, we've played a lot of hockey. Basically saying that, but God bless him, because I think he's being very frank and honest about where this team is at. And that's the one thing I could appreciate about Dylan Larkin. He really doesn't sugarcoat stuff. He wears his heart on his sleeve, which sometimes he's been criticized for, but hey, he just says what he feels, and it's genuine. So he basically acknowledged the fact that this team is tired. I think they're tired physically, of course, because of their schedule, but they're also tired psychologically, emotionally. And they've had to deal with, a lot of change, right? Again, some huge injuries, 2 injuries in net, right? They've got Patrick Kane coming on board. And I'll tell you what, I don't care who you are. You've got a player, the caliber of Patrick Kane, that comes into your organization, and he's basically a living legend. Everyone acknowledges this. I think some people are looking for him to be the savior. By the way, don't look at that. And we're going to talk about Patrick Kane specifically later on. But the fact is, you got a player of that caliber coming onto your roster, and now you got to kind of learn his game. He's learning yours, but you also have to learn how he plays. And if he's playing at such an elevated level, there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve. So everybody's got to learn how to play together. Everybody's got to start to understand each other on the ice, as well as in the locker room as well. So you've got those adjustments to make, and the Red Wings have just had a whole lot of adjustments to make in a time when they've been really pressed in terms of the schedule, and they're tired on both fronts. So I agree with you. I think this break will do them good, and I think you're going to see a different team come back. Not maybe the first game after the break, but I think maybe second, third game you're gonna start to see a different Red Wings team.
Well, we got some comments in the comment section, so we're going to get to that right now. Brittany Hemming, she says, well, we need a goalie that has the ability to steal some games when the defense is not playing well. That's what every team is looking for, and if you can find one of those guys, you have to take it. And hopefully, it's going to be hard to get a guy who is going to be at this point in the season come in and do that. I mean, it could be a guy like Hutchinson. It could be a guy like Costa that maybe you think at the end of the season, or maybe it could be a guy that you don't even have on your roster you trade for. But that's what you have to look at. Brandon Mueller, he says they are done. The goaltending is done. The offense can't keep up. It's over this season. I look forward to the deadline. Hopefully Stevie Y will do what he does. And then Brittany Hemming says, again, we can't put everything into one player. Talking about your Patrick Kane assessment, Cindy, and we're going to get to that right now. But we need everyone to step up. And I think what she says right there is exactly what we need to talk about, because I don't think it's a Patrick Kane issue. I don't think it's a total Red Wing issue. Okay. I think the Red Wings, when you get a player like Patrick Kane, or any player, like whenever a new player comes onto the roster, one of the things that I heard a lot of analysts say across the NHL is, good thing he's coming in December and not March. Because when you come in March, you're trying to learn this team really quickly, and then you're going into the playoffs, if you make a trade deadline acquisition. This was not a trade deadline acquisition. This was more a free agent acquisition, but you got him in December. So there's going to be an acclimation period. I think a lot of people were thinking that Patrick Kane was going to come in here and be, the Patrick Kane of old, but I think he still needs to get his legs underneath him. And I also don't think it helped that Larkin wasn't in for a couple games. Confer wasn't in for a couple games.
Perron's still out.
David Perron was still out. You had, Andrew Kopp stepping up, and God bless his heart. I mean, JT Confer and Dylan Larkin are way better players. So the Red Wings have dealt with a lot of injuries lately, okay? So the fact that, I see Brandon's comment, I go, you kind of got to take into perspective, okay? Like, this isn't as bad as it looks. I know it could be doom and gloom all the time. You could look at it and you can go, oh, it's going to get a lot worse from here. The season's done. The season's over with. But last year, I told people on the Lions podcast, I said, look, they're 1-6 at that time. And I said, look, there's signs that they're going to get this thing together. Now, they're not going to be a perfect team, but you have to remember that this is such a long season. Things change very, very quickly in all sports, except basketball. Basketball may be the only one that doesn't change in like a broad spectrum, like Major League Baseball, NHL, and NFL. But I told people that. And the fact of the matter is that you're still early in the season. You built up a good lead in the division, and now you're out of the playoff right now, but you're going to get yourself back in there when you're healthy, and this break comes at a great time. I can't reiterate that enough. Like, this is like the best time to have a break. If you're struggling, you kind of want this break to happen right now. You got 2 more games, maybe you can win one of them and then kind of go into the break with a little bit of ammunition, and you're not as I know the players don't think that they're as bad as they're playing right now.
Well, and that's where their frustration comes from, Joe. Their frustration comes from knowing that they are better than their recent game results show. They know they're better than this. And yeah. And it's just a matter of things clicking into place. It's like Dylan Larkin said, they're just not clicking right now. That's understandable, actually. Frustrating for us, frustrating for them, but understandable. And Brandon, my darling, let me tell you what my good friend Darren McCarty just told me the other day. I talk to him all the time. And you know what? I was freaking out just like you. I really was. I was just losing my, right? And I was explaining this to Darren, and Darren McCarty says to me, he said, Cindy, it is way too early for you to be this emotionally invested. He said maybe in March or April. He didn't even say January, February. He said maybe if this is the situation in March or April, and it's funny, Joe, you should bring up, I think you brought up April or whatever, or March. Yeah, that's when you panic. If you're in this situation, then that's when you panic. So I just want you to know, Brandon, I share exactly your sentiments, but I have been revived because I had a 4-time Stanley Cup champion, dear friend of mine, tell me not to worry. And I trust that he knows this better than I do, just on a hunch, maybe. So,
It's
and,
just a hunch.
right, maybe. And so, but the thing of it is the things that are wrong, I think we all know what they are. It's interesting too, Joe. I want to let people know, man, listen to this podcast because you hear it here first, right? And you get to communicate with us. It's fantastic. I'm willing to bet you statistically, Joe, if you go back to our last show, 70 to 80% of what we talked about is exactly what Ozzy and Larry Murphy said in their post-game analysis last night after the Winnipeg game. It was exactly, what are the issues? Momentum. We talk about momentum all the time. When there's a shift in the momentum, and then you just kind of go downhill. When they scored those 3 goals on us, it was a momentum shift. You have to be aware of those things. It's the most powerful force in the universe. And the Red Wings are often subject to that, right? That momentum shift. You got to be aware of how to handle those things. Defense, the fact that the defensive hockey has been abysmal. I mean, everybody knows they've got to play defensive hockey. We talked about that last week. That's key to them moving forward and becoming more successful and getting us deeper into the playoffs. I know people are concerned they're going to make the playoffs. They're going to make the playoffs. But we've got to start playing better defensive hockey because the D-zone coverage is absolutely disastrous. We've got to figure that out. And the reality is we had been having problems in net from the beginning of the season. Okay.
Yep.
That is nothing new, but now we have an opportunity to make some changes. Granted, forced on us, but
Right.
I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And then you just got to give these guys time to gel. That's the other thing Chris Osgood was very clear on yesterday. It's what I talked about last week. You've got to give them time to gel. So just because they have this little stretch that's ugly and difficult for all of us, it is just a temporary thing. You've got too much talent on this roster, and you've got too many guys who are adequately unhappy with the current results. They're not going to let this be their legacy for the season. So hang in there. It's going to get better. But I think they need a rest. I think they need a break, and they just need a little bit more time. They're going to be just fine.
Yeah, I think what you just hit on. I mean, Edward in the comments said Kane has been great. They just need to figure out line chemistry. I think this is something that me and you have hit on ad nauseum, pretty much, is that everything's about chemistry. When I play ball hockey, which we just won a championship, and I can get my championship trophy right there, but maybe later in the podcast. But anyways,
you're such a boss, Joe.
but
chemistry, yeah, baby, let's talk about it. Everybody knows chemistry is key.
Chemistry is the number one.
Sorry, I digress.
Chemistry is the number one thing. I mean,
you bet.
You can't have, if you don't have chemistry in sports, especially hockey and football. Those two sports where you need chemistry. I mean, it's kind of like dating. You have to have chemistry with the person you're dating or married to. Like, if you don't have chemistry, I'm gonna tell you this right now, probably not gonna work out in your favor, or your husband's favor, or your wife's favor, whatever. It's
not gonna be cool. It's not gonna be cool. I mean, how really seriously, Joe? I don't know if you've had this experience. I've had this experience myself. All of us out there probably had it. You go out with somebody and you're like, oh my gosh, this is an absolutely like off the charts 10 plus on the rating scale, right? But you're like, you kiss the guy, you kiss the girl, and it's like kissing your brother or your sister. You're like, what the heck's that about? This should have been knocking my socks off, man. I should be to the moon by now. Nope. Nope. It's like, and you're disappointed. You're like, damn, how's that? Chemistry. There wasn't any chemistry. It's it.
Chemistry is huge, especially in hockey too. I mean, hockey is what, like, if you don't have chemistry with your line mates, like you could see Kane and DeBrincat, they have so much chemistry together that they know where each other are going to be at a certain point, right? And that's kind of what we're talking about, and Kane's going to have to develop that with his guys like Larkin, and especially on the power play. I could see it right there because there's times that Kane has a shot to take he's winding up to take the shot and he kind of misses on it because it's not as fast as he expects. Maybe it's slower than he expects, or maybe it's just like a little bit different than he's used to. And those are all things that you adjust to over the course of a year, and that's why it's good that you got Kane in December and not like February or March. So that's a good part.
Absolutely. And here's the thing with chemistry. What actually is happening? What happens is when you have good chemistry with someone, and you alluded to it here, your play on the ice becomes intuitive.
Yep.
Why is that important? It's important because you can feel faster than you can think, right? So you're feeling the game, you're feeling where they're at. You just instinctively know, you have intuition about the play instead of having to think about it. And when they're having to think, then they're taking that split second more to move into position. They're taking that split second more to handle that puck a certain way. And it costs you that. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but it all does add up. So that intuitive play over, let's say, an academic play where you're thinking the game, you're feeling the game. And that is how important chemistry is. And that's what it does. And the result at the end of the day is that you're just a little bit faster. You're just a little bit sharper. You're just a little bit quicker on draws. You're just a little bit one step or one half a step ahead of the other guy who's got you covered, and you're going to beat him. That's the benefit of intuition on the ice.
Yeah, that's the major point, and I think that chemistry is something that they're going to have to get worked out because we talk about the issues all the time, Cindy, and we could keep talking about all the issues that they have, but the real reason for the issues they have right now is chemistry and staying healthy. Now, you can't help the defensive portion of I mean, they've been better defensively, but not as what you expect. And I think if you look across the league, I mean, teams are struggling defensively. Like, let's be honest. Like, this league, there's a lot of teams that are struggling defensively. You're not alone. I mean, there's teams that are literally cycling two lines because that's the only two lines that they feel comfortable with. So it's kind of an NHL issue right now, which speaks to the broader spectrum of the game that is way beyond this podcast. I mean, it's more about, there's players coming up that are not ready to play at this moment. So, and I think eventually, Stevie Y is going to make a move either. And I want to talk to you about this, Cindy. It's really simple. I think Steve Yzerman is going to make a move at some point, and it doesn't have to be a trade or nothing like that. But what I look at Simon Edmondson in the Grand Rapids, and I think of what he could do on this defensive pairings on this team. And obviously, you would have to trade someone because there's a log jam of defensemen in front of him, which this is what we talked about when they signed some of these guys or they traded for Jeff Petrie, is that eventually, Simon Edmondson's he's gonna force his way up, right? So at some point, I could see you getting Edmondson up, I could see you getting reinforcements. So I look at this little brief time, and I think that it's just you got to survive the storm. That's basically what it is. I heard.
Yeah, well, go ahead.
I heard on NHL Network, the radio, the other day, and he was talking about the Red Wings. I think it was Bill Roos, not Bill Roos, Rob Roos, the guy who played on the Red Wings. I'm forgetting the name. It's escaping me, but because I didn't get to see him on TV, so I don't know. I didn't know who it was, but then I figured out who it was. But he said, the Red Wings have such a deep prospect system that they can reach into the prospect pool at any given time and say, this is who we're going with. And we talk about all the time with Steve Yzerman that, he's a guy that he's not afraid to make moves at a moment's notice. So I look at this and I go, there's a chance that Edmondson can come up at some point. And I think that if things keep going the way that they're going, especially with the goaltending, we talked about ad nauseum again, I think there's a move that has to be made at goaltender. And I think he will make a move at goaltender because none of your prospects right now are ready. Costa and Augustine, who's playing really, really well at Michigan State, but he's going to be playing at the World Juniors. I mean, I just think that at some point, if Hutchinson doesn't, translate. If he doesn't do good enough, I think they're going to be looking outside the organization for a goalie. But I think their defenseman that they're looking for is in Grand Rapids.
Okay, so let me take those things one at a time. First off, do I think Steve is going to make a move for a goalie or a defenseman, or if he's going to bring somebody up? So first off, Steve is always 3 or 4 steps ahead of everybody else. He already knows. He's already got contingency plans in place. It's just how he functions. What he does is he has contingency plans, and then it's kind of an if then. If this happens, then I'll do this. If this happens, then I'll do that. And he's always got eyes everywhere, all over the game in every level, so that he can pull those resources from wherever he needs them, depending on if the situation presents itself. So that's just how the guy works. So be not afraid, as Darren would say, because Steve's really that's it. You couldn't ask for a better GM to be on top of it. Now, will he pick up another goalie? I believe he will. I will tell you that at the end of the day, as big as I was on Michael Hutchinson, as much much hope, promise I have for him, I don't think he's going to be the caliber goalie Steve is going to need in the playoffs. He's not a playoff goalie, and neither is Reimer in my mind. I think he's going to look for that. So yes, I think he will make that move. I think he will bring on another goalie who can make him, more value in the playoffs. Number 2, Simon Edvinsson in the defenseman, right down in Grand Rapids. So here's the thing with Simon Edvinsson, and I know that there's a lot of Simon Edvinsson fans out there. Okay. I know I like him too, but here's what I observed personally and what I have been told about Simon Edvinsson. He's got some great attributes. His size is a huge thing. Some of the way he plays, there are some nuances of his play that are very intriguing. It could be very valuable. And that primarily comes from, his training overseas in Europe. So Steve likes those things. Here's the downsides of Simon Edvinsson and why you don't see him on the roster and why you didn't see him on the roster before. They keep trying to bring him up because of those things that are so valuable that I just mentioned. Here's the problem. Simon Edvinsson's very young, and he has many of the trappings of youth, which is, energy and a young body and all that stuff, which is great. But he also has some of the detriments of it, and that is he's a little cocky. He's having a hard time sometimes taking constructive criticism. He's not quite as teachable as they would like him to be. A little bit of a chip on his shoulder, a little bit of attitude. Now he started to round that off a little bit this season. It was really evident when he first got here. They're like, hey, a lot of talent, but attitude's got to get in line. So, and he has curbed that a little bit. He had a little talking to, I think, a couple of them, and they got him to curb that a little bit. But he's still not quite there in terms of really being able to fit in. It's not that he doesn't have the skill, but they're also working on that. He's a little bit slow, and they're trying to get him a little quicker, especially on release and stuff like that. His release isn't quite as quick as they would like it to be and stuff like that. So there's a couple elements of Simon Edvinsson's game that they're still polishing, which is why he's in Grand Rapids, not on the roster. So do I think he'll bring him up? I think it's possible. However, when you have a defenseman, one of the defensemen we haven't talked about who's been really solid, and I'm so glad you got to see a little bit of what more he can do, and that's Olli Mata. They liked Olli Mata when they first brought him in. He's kind of a quieter guy. You don't hear a lot about him. He's not one of those marquee players that's going to stand out to you, but he has been solid in the defensive role, in the role he's been in since the season started, and now he's starting to produce offense as well. So a very valuable player in Olli Mata, more so than maybe people realize. So I'm not sure. Again, you talk about chemistry, Joe. I think the Edvinsson element, they had him working with Olli Mata, and that's another reason I bring it up, because in training camp they had him paired with him quite a few times, and I don't know if that is something they would be looking to do. Maybe. But I'm not sure on that. So I think that's a maybe. So I think those are the two things you asked me about, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think you gave a great synopsis on why Edvinsson isn't on the roster, and I also heard the same thing. But I think at some point with the installation of veteran leaders that you have, I think that you can eventually bring him up and say, like, look, we're to give you a try, maybe a 5 game, 6 game try, right? And if you're, you can't take criticism real well, or you're kind of cocky, I mean, you better back it up. I think that a lot of players in this league, I think a lot of players in this league, like the JJ Proteka guy from Buffalo, he's a very cocky player. You could tell by the way he plays the game, but man, is he fun to watch. And I think when you think about being cocky, you better back it up. I think a lot of people look at Steve Eiserman and they go, "That's what I want in a hockey player." But these kids coming up nowadays, um, it's funny because I was listening to Spittin' Chicklets and they're like, these kids coming up nowadays, they're nothing like they would when we came up. And they're not even that old. They're like in their mid 30s or
Right.
40s. So
Right.
so if they're saying something, you're obviously seeing like a trend with these young kids. And the way I look at it is, it's a great situation for a young player to come into, because Steve Eiserman knows what to expect from his players. And I think that's, the veteran leadership on the team, whether it be, David Perron or Patrick Kane or Alex DeBrincat or Dylan Larkin or David Perron, those are great to have in the room, if you do bring up a kid. So that's what I look at. I think that's why Stevie White insulated this room with leaders. Um, I know there's a lot of people out there that were wondering, why did they sign all these players if they have these great prospects down there? And it's something along the lines of what you should have said. What you just said is absolutely true. These players got to come up and they gotta be ready to play, and not just ready to play at a skill level, but ready to play at a, a mental level. And I think
That's right.
a lot of people who watch hockey, they don't really realize that. Because when you go to play in the NHL, you are going to be, there's going to be times where you look like crap. There's just reality. It's funny because like I heard Jared Goff on 97 Ticket. He's like, sometimes I play bad, and I know I play bad, so I got to kind of shove it off. I think that's what it is with hockey. Like sometimes you're gonna make the wrong play, you're gonna make the wrong pass, you're gonna make the wrong pinch, and it's gonna end up in the back of your net. And the reality of the situation is, you had better have the mental fortitude as a young player to kind of put yourself and say, okay, that was a bad play. Let's go on to the next play. And I think with these goalies that you have on the roster right now, especially Husso, I see a little bit of mental gymnastics in their head too. And there's been, now you know what I'm about to say, Cindy, because I'm a goalie and I used to be a goalie.
Yeah.
Goalies are the most fragile players on the ice.
They're weird. They're just weird.
They're not weird. I'd say fragile. It's kind of like a closing pitcher in baseball or a kicker in hockey, kicker in football. Like those three positions, I don't know what it is, but when they're bad, holy hell, they are bad. But when they're good, you're like, wow, this is great. Like this guy's awesome. And then when they're kind of in the middle, you're like, well, why can't he be better? Like there's always there's never a happy medium. And so I look at those three positions, I go, man, those are some weird guys at the start. And I look at the goalies right now, and I see James Reimer. I think when he gets some goals scored on him, he kind of goes into a shell. Alex Lyon, I think he's played pretty well for the most part, but there's been games where he's let a couple in and kind of manifested itself. And Husso is another one. We didn't see this Husso before, so I don't know where it came from, but I mean, he gets goals scored on him, and it's in a hurry. Like there's some saves that he should be making, he's not making, and this is what we're talking about. I know a lot of people are clamoring for Sebastian Costa to be called up to the roster. And, what you just hit on about Simon Evanson, about how, maybe it's about the mental fortitude, kind of like the mental gymnastics game of that. That's probably why Costa didn't get called up.
It could very well be. And I'll tell you that the one guy that the first thing that they mentioned about him and the reason why he got on the roster and has stayed on the roster, yes, his skill level, but Moritz Seider, one of the first things you will find anybody saying about Moritz Seider is his maturity level. That they always comment on it, always.
Yep.
Mo Seider even as much as his actual skill set, his hockey skills were involved. What impressed management and what impressed the decision makers at the Red Wings organization about Mo Seider was his level of maturity for his age. And that really is what earned him a spot over, all other things being equal. Okay. That's what earned Morris Sider a spot. And as you can see, he's flourished. Yeah, he had a sophomore slump, of course. But again, how did he handle that? He handled it with the maturity level of a much more seasoned player. And that's what they need. They need those young bodies. They need that fresh skill. They need all of that, but yet with the mental acuity and maturity level of a 5, 6, 7 year veteran. That's a sweet spot. And that is why Mo Seider is so incredibly valuable. And why, I think of anybody, I mean, we talk about guys who are untradeable. Mo Seider, I would call
Yeah.
Same thing with Dylan Larkin for different reasons. But when we talk about, speaking of trades, and we're talking about Simon Edvinsson a little bit, and then we're talking about, or what the possibility is of maybe Steve Yzerman doing a trade for a goalie and what prospect he could choose from. Jonathan Berggren his name has come up quite a bit. I think people were a little shocked. I think they were a little disappointed that the Red Wings would choose or consider Jonathan Berggren to be up on the trading block. But the reality is that he's looking for the trade too. And that just came out recently as well, because he's looking for some more ice time. He's looking for some playing time. He's looking for some NHL time, and he's looking to go to an organization that might be able to provide that to him, because the reality is there's just no spot for him on this roster right now. And I think, especially with Patrick Kane coming on, I think that was kind of the last straw for him. I was like, well, screw it. I'm not, my chances just went from slim to none. And, he's looking for that opportunity. So, and Steve is very good. It wouldn't surprise me if he did get traded in perhaps a trade for a defenseman or goalie or something like that, because Steve is very responsive to players' needs and desires for their own interests and their own careers. I mean, he's not a jerk that way.
Right.
He's very good about that. And he tries to accommodate that when possible. So with regards to prospect trading and potential trades or whatever, if you see Jonathan Berggren on the go, I think it's mutually beneficial. And I think that's actually very generous of Steve to give him that opportunity, should that happen. And I think it probably will, by the way, just so you know.
Yeah, that's an interesting kind of tidbit. Because
you're muted, Joe. We can't hear you.
No, I'm. You can hear me.
You just want me to carry the show? I got it.
No, but I think that's an interesting tidbit that you have right there, because one of the things I always say about these young players is, like, if you're afraid to compete at a high level, I don't really want you on the roster anyways. So if they can find something, you still can't hear me?
I can now. You're good.
Oh, all right, because I don't know what the hell was going on, but yeah, like I said, if you're afraid to compete, like, that's an issue in itself. Like, you should be able to compete with your team, and you should be able to compete for your spot. I mean, that's part of sports. Like, you always want to compete at a high level, and if you really want to spot in the roster, I mean, you got to compete with good players. That's just the way it goes. And if you think that you're a great player, you shouldn't have any worries about competing against, like, the Velenos, the Rasmussens, and all that stuff. Like, you really shouldn't. So, if they could make a trade with Berggren and get a goalie that's mutually beneficial for both parties, I don't really want Berggren on the roster if he's going to be like that. I mean, we don't know if that's considerably true, but if it is true that he is kind of initiating kind of like Steve Yzerman's hand, then you got to really think about it in a realistic standpoint. Like, he's not really wanting to compete with other players on the roster, because why? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, because why?
Yeah, I'm not sure. That just came out recently. I think it was, I forgot what news source reported that today, but I read that today out there in one of the one of the blogs or one of the news sources. And I will tell you, I honestly do not have any personal information on that particular score. So I can't say that. It's just that it was reported. And I thought, well, if that's the case, then it wouldn't surprise me as to why we've heard some of these rumors that are coming out of there, just because I know, that Steve wants to give these guys every opportunity to succeed. And he's got a history of doing that with various players. And so, I know people were a little concerned about it, but, I think that it'll be a mutually agreed upon decision when and if it's made. So.
Muted again. There we go. I'm muted again. I just muted myself. I don't know. Anyways,
No worries.
what you just said is true, because like we don't know if it's true or not. Like we were going off of a report of some substantial claim, and if it is true, well, I really don't want him on the team anyways because he's not ready to compete. But here's the thing: if there is a trade to be made, I think Bergeron's the first one to go.
Well, I think he offers some value on the trading block for sure. There's no doubt that he's got some significant talent that can be really nurtured and be a great benefit to some of these organizations out there that are struggling with forward, talent. So it's interesting also too. Like I'll tell you, if I hear something from one of my sources, like when Anthony Mantha got traded, like when DeBrincat was coming here, like when Patrick Kane was coming here. And I said, hey, look, wouldn't surprise me if you heard this. My sources are telling me X. We had some people saying, oh, well, where are your sources? What's your source? I want to say, I'm the source, the people I'm talking to. And of course, we've said this before, we can't disclose those sources because then we wouldn't have them anymore. So, right. But in this case, I will tell you, it's not from one of my sources, just something I read. So we'll always make sure to tell you that, by the way, too. And what I do expect to see, though, I do expect Steve to make more changes. I think we can wait to see that. You're going to expect to see that. And he's way ahead of this curve. I don't want to say it was expected. It's somewhat unexpected circumstances, but Steve always has contingency plans in place. So he had a contingency plan in place for this, and I think he's going to execute that plan as soon as he has the capability to do that.
Yeah, I think that, Steve Yzerman, I think he's thinking of everything on the table right now. I think that with his addition of Patrick Kane, I think he believes this team is a playoff team. That's my thinking. I'm pretty sure that's Steve Yzerman's thinking too.
Yes, he does.
So I think he's going to be more aggressive with this team. I think he's going to be, we know that the one thing we do know about Steve Yzerman, he's not afraid to make a move, and he's not afraid to be aggressive. That's one of the things I can admire about Steve Yzerman is, a lot of people got in on him over the first couple years he was here because he didn't make some big free agent acquisition because they were still rebuilding. You know what I'm saying? They're not going to make some big play for a free agent when they're rebuilding. It's not the reality. But as this team has got better, he's made more and more moves to get better. And the Alex DeBrincat trade was one of those trades where you go, okay, he thinks that this team is close. And the addition of Patrick King kind of reaffirmed that. So I think he's going to look at this from the realistic standpoint that he does is he's going to give these guys a little bit of time, but he's also going to be kind of notching down what this team needs at the trade deadline when they get there. Because I think that there's still a lot of season to play, so it can go either way. But I think he thinks that they are a playoff team and they're going to be in a playoff position at trade deadline. And it's smart to think that way because you can do your scouting right now, and then if you get to the trade deadline and you're in one of those playoff teams that is on the cusp, you can make that move, and you've already thought about it. That's one thing about Steve Yzerman. We could say he's always one step ahead.
Yep.
And with the way that him and Brad Holmes, the Lions general manager, they have a lot in common. And the one thing I could say about their common approach is they're patient, but at some point they do make a move. But they really do value both general managers value chemistry, they value leadership, and they value a certain way of your play. And that's one thing you can see from both those guys because Yzerman bringing in Petrie and DeBrincat and Kane and Perron and Comfer, like people didn't really give comfort the due that he was given because he signed a big contract and people are like, what a massive overpay, but look how good that contract is looking right now. And that's what Steve Eisman looks at, and that's how he builds that's how you build a championship roster. You make these moves that a lot of people on the outside say, "Oh, what an overpay! What a dumb decision!" And it's like both these general managers, Steve Eisman and Brett Holmes, they've done this a couple of times and made people look stupid. So that's what I look at.
Well, the thing of it is, when people, it's amazing to me when people try to say, Steve Eisman is caught flat-footed, he's unaware, or something like that. And I'm like, what planet are you on? Steve Eiserman's never unaware. If anything, he is probably such a hands-on general manager. He seems sometimes a little distant and aloof, like a lot of times, like he does not usually fly on the team plane, just so you know. He doesn't travel with the team usually. He keeps that kind of distance, and there's a reason that he does it. That's just how he rolls. But the guy knows everything that's going on. He might not be on those team plane trips, but he knows exactly what's being said on that plane. He is, he always knows what's going on. Look where he's at right now. He's always got his eye to the future. Always. He's at the juniors tournament. Yeah. Right now. Scouting. This guy's always looking to the future, and there isn't.
And he's scouting his own players too, because
absolutely.
He got a lot of own players. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it is very rare, if ever, that he is unaware of something. So that doesn't mean you always agree with his decisions. Maybe you think he should have done something sooner, should have waited on something else, maybe should have made a bigger move, shouldn't have made a move, whatever the case might be. But the guy isn't unaware. I promise you that. And when they're coming into these next couple of games here, they're going to come up against the Flyers, and then they got to play the Devils. They're going to play the Devils in New Jersey. Aha, there you go. They're playing the Flyers here, and then they're going to be playing the Devils in New Jersey. We've actually been performing very well against New Jersey, and they're a tough team. So I really am looking for the Red Wings to split that. I think actually, I have a feeling they're probably going to lose to Philly. I don't know why, but I think they're going to beat the Devils. So I think they're going to, if they split those, that's great. Okay. Any win before Christmas is going to be huge psychologically. I would love for them to beat. In fact, if I had to choose, I would rather they beat New Jersey in New Jersey, because it's that last game before the break, and going into the break with a win under their belt, I think will pay huge dividends psychologically.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I think when you look ahead to the schedule, I think the Friday game, I think they have a good shot to win because I think they're at home. And I also like the Jersey game and if they could win one of them, that would be huge. I think you're right about going into the break with a win, though. But if you win two of them, that's the confidence builder right there. That's a confidence kind of streak that you really want to get on. And then you go into the break and you're hoping hopefully you get some guys back, you get some people back to help you out, down the stretch, and then hopefully you stay not injured, because that's a health is a big issue. Some of these teams in the sport, the reason they fall off is because of injuries. Like, this is a salary cap league, and it's a lot of these teams are strapped to the gill. So, we looked at the last couple games, Cindy, and they lost the Hurricanes at the last, when we last talked. They lost the Flyers. That was in Philadelphia. That was a weird game. The Red Wings had so many chances, and it was just weird that happened. The Ducks game was a game that I watched at nauseum. I kind of watched it twice, which was kind of sad. But anyways,
because how did you hold your cookies down for that one? Twice or less.
Here's what I did. I went back and watched that Ducks game, right? And I felt like the Red Wings played a pretty damn good game. Now, I think there was mental lapses, and we talked about the mental aspect earlier with the Edmonton stuff, but I thought there was mental lapses that allowed the young Anaheim Ducks team to get a little bit of a boost. And then, you try to play catch up, and you can't play catch up in this league. You just can't. So the way I look at it from my standpoint, the Winnipeg game, that's a game that, you kind of win there, and Winnipeg's a tough place to play. And then when you put it in the factor of you're pretty much starting your third goaltender, not a good situation to be in, guys. Like, there's not really a good situation to be in. So
I don't know, Joe. The Anaheim game just made me sick to my stomach. I mean, my stomach was turning in that game. Made me sick. And watching that game last night, I had a hard time keeping it down. I was just beside myself. Again, I'm not supposed to be this emotionally invested, but I can't help it, right? I mean, it's the best part about this game is it gets you emotionally invested. I don't care what
well,
time of year it is.
the way I kind of seen it with that game yesterday, I thought it was a game that I figured when they went into it, I figured they were going to lose. I mean, you kind of can get a feel of what's going to happen, and I feel like Winnipeg is a team that they're much more talented than most people give them credit for, and I feel like that Winnipeg trip is it's a hard place to play. Number one, it's a hard travel, and when you're not healthy like the Red Wings aren't right now, you kind of put yourself in a predicament where you're kind of like, oh, we got to go travel to freaking Winnipeg. Like, you don't want to go to Winnipeg. Like, who the hell wants to go to Winnipeg? It's like
Nobody wants to go to Winnipeg.
It's probably like -45 right there
Right
now. So there's no one that's like going, yeah, let's go take a vacation in Winnipeg in the wintertime. So
you're right. Yeah, Mickey Redmond talks about that all the time. I'll tell you, you know what always makes me nervous? And this is upcoming in January and February. This is where I'm going to get nervous, right?
The California trip?
Yep. That West Coast trip, It screws us every time. I don't know what the hell happens. I don't know if it's a time change thing. We joke about this, right, every year, and we don't know if it's, the blondes on the beach in California that are distracting these guys or what, but something goes very wrong when we go out on the West Coast. So that West Coast trip has me nervous.
The Spit Chicklets podcast, and they did an accurate description of this when I think they had Trevor Zegras on, or one of the Ducks. They had one of the Ducks on, or whatever. But they were like, even the Ducks players even see like, yeah, when the teams come into Anaheim, they usually don't play their best game, and there's a really big reason for that.
If I were those clubs, Joe, I'll tell you what. If I were those clubs, knowing that, I'd have a whole line of busty blondes right outside the rink or the hotel that they're coming into and saying, you free margaritas, trips to the beach, pregame with us. I don't care, man. I would have all kinds of temptation just sitting there waiting for them, knowing, trying to really capitalize on that weakness. And that's what I would do. But, I'm evil that way.
Yeah.
But,
I'm pretty sure teams do that. Like
they should.
Like when you're going to Tampa Bay, like, I mean, I'm pretty sure people are like, yeah, I'm gonna go to the beach, dude, because I really need to go to the beach. Or Florida, the Florida Panthers, like, I know they play in Sunrise, Florida, but they're not far from Miami, so
right on.
So like, you go to South Beach, yeah, that's gonna throw your game off a little bit. I mean.
For sure. They're at all the clubs and they're out there having a good time and enjoying themselves. But I'm worried about the West Coast trip, absolutely, because it's always been an Achilles heel for us. And if we just start getting some momentum going, and then we got to go on that trip, and then get the air gets deflated out of the balloon again, I don't like what that might do psychologically to him, because the other one coming up in January and more like February is that Canadian trip. That Canadian trip where they're going to come up against the Oilers, the Canucks, Calgary, and then they go into Seattle. That's going to be tough. Yep. That is a tough trip. And, there's a couple teams in there that we should probably certainly win games against, but I think that is going to be tough. And that's another stretch that I'm worried about. Just so everyone watching or listening, I'm telling you right now, those are two parts of the schedule that have always been a challenge for the Red Wings, always. So don't go freaking out when they might lose the majority of those games, or go on a little losing streak there, because they've done it all the time. So don't think it's because this isn't happening or that's not happening, or Steve Yzerman should be, didn't do this or whatever. It's historically been challenging for the Red Wings. So that's why it's so important that the Wings can pick up some solid wins, get a little bit on a streak, get some winning momentum going in some of these other parts of the schedule that are coming up that are maybe a little bit more amenable to them, because when those other pieces come in, and that all happens before I think it all happens before the All-Star break. Nope. Okay, so the Canadian trip is right after the All-Star break. So,
Yep.
Mid-February. So those are two kind of tenuous times, and so just hang on, everybody. If that happens, know that we remind you that it always does. So, but we got to make up some wins. We got to get some win streaks and momentum going into those. So hopefully, they're not as harsh as they could be.
Yeah, look at that schedule. Like you just said, you got you go to Minnesota on 27th. You come home against the Preds and the Bruins. Those are not easy games because the Preds can play pretty good hockey and they have good goaltending. The Bruins are the Bruins. We've been playing pretty well against them, so I'm pretty confident in that game. But you look at the January schedule. January 2nd, you got the Sharks in San Jose. You got the Kings in LA, Ducks in Anaheim. Then you come home. You play the Oilers, the Kings. You go to Toronto. You go to Florida, you go to Carolina, you play the Lightning, you play the Stars, you play the Flyers, you play the Golden Knights and the Senators. That's a tough month of January. So
that's what I'm saying.
They're gonna. Yep. The hope is that they get healthy going into that January. Going into January, because if you go into January and you're healthy, that's one thing that would help them out tremendously. But you're also going to have to get good goaltending going into January, and that's going to be something that they're going to have to iron out. And we're going to be talking about it a lot on this podcast. But it's been a great show today, Cindy, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people enjoyed it. We had a lot of people that were chiming in and giving their opinions on the Red Alert podcast, on the Red Alert Detroit Red Wings podcast page, also the Between the Whistles YouTube page, my Twitter, and my personal Facebook, and your personal Facebook. So a lot of people enjoyed it. I'm pretty sure the people that are going to be listening to this on the Apple or Spotify, go to the Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcast and search up the Red Alert Detroit Red Wings podcast. If you liked what you heard or you kind of missed blips and blurbs and you want to go back and listen to more, and rate and review us, because that's what they say you should have.
Yes, rate and review us, even if it's the good, the bad, and the ugly. But we're hoping that it's good because we love all of you guys out there, and we're all pulling for the Wings. And also make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, because a lot of times we have special content on there that you don't get in any of the other platforms, and a lot of videos and stuff. Joe is one of the best at pulling great video footage. He puts together some fantastic stuff that's totally unique to us that you will really, really enjoy. So make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel as well.
Yeah, so I appreciate everyone for watching and listening on either on the podcast or watching us on Facebook Live or YouTube Live or Twitter. It was great to talk hockey, and we're going to do this again next week, Cindy.
Yeah.
But if you are a fan of the show, we are starting a Cindy and Joe show. It's rebooting kind of thing next week. We'll kind of figure out what date it's going to be. We'll post it, but that'll be fun. It's going to be more about, just it's going to be way above the spectrum of hockey, but we'll talk about a lot of things, because Cindy, when me and her start talking, it can go a lot of different ways. So that's the way it goes.
We are going to talk about things that other people don't, from two totally different perspectives.
We stay on task on this podcast because we know that people kind of get a little bit, especially the hockey crowd, oh, I don't like, some of the funny business that happens on these podcasts. I want this serious podcast, like we're, like Pat Caputo on 97.1 The Ticket, hearing him say, the Red Wings are a good team, very, very, I like their Corsi rating. It's like, okay, dude, like, you're boring me to tears. Thank God for Ken Kell and Danella Bruce, which, she's one of your constituents, Mrs. Cindy Berry.
Yeah, she's out here in my neck of the woods for sure. I haven't had a chance to meet her yet, actually, but she's lovely.
We should get her on the podcast soon. And thank you guys for listening and watching, and we will talk to you on the next Red Alert podcast. Hopefully we have a little bit better of kind of podcasts on being more cheerful and happy. But Merry Christmas and
Merry
Christmas.
Holidays.
And if you don't know about Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy Hanukkah, Happy,
stay safe.
Whatever
have a DD.
Whatever you celebrate, and Happy New Year to you guys. And we will see you in the new year, because I think we're going to do it after. But we might do a little podcast next week. I don't know. We'll see. But thanks for watching. We will see you in the next Red Alert podcast. Thanks for watching and listening, and we will see you then.
See you then.